you get involved in finding out why they're not getting the business in that they should be getting in. And of course, business is all about people. So I get involved in a whole variety of different aspects of helping businesses to do what they need to do to get leaner, quicker, faster, and more customers in the door. So, I'm not very good at, although I do quite a lot of public speaking, I'm not very good at pre-preparing stuff, so I'm just going to put 3 or 4 headings on the board and then perhaps run through those. But I would like to begin with an apology. It's not a really good way of beginning a presentation, but I'm going to begin with an apology. Nigel, don't worry. I'm not one of those kind of performance speakers. I don't do juggling. I've seen that as a way of making a point. I don't do. I'm not a song and dance man. You know, in my opinion, when people come and hear somebody speak, it's because they want to hear what they've got to say and hopefully take away something interesting rather than come for a performance. So I'm not really performing in any fashion. I think some of you may know what I mean by that, having seen lots of speakers.
You're not going to be performing this.
Sorry?
You're not going to be performing this.
I won't, but I'll be happy to hand that over to you to show how it works. So look, the only thing I'm hoping to do, well, we can find out, hey, that's a great question. The only thing I'm hoping to do this afternoon is maybe just give you some thoughts as to some of the things that I've come across in helping hundreds of businesses over the past 14 years. I don't come from a consulting background, so again, I'm going to apologise, I don't come from a consulting background. I'm not a consultant from the point of view that I don't have some predetermined methodology of how you find out a problem and then another formula as to how you fix that, and it really doesn't matter what business you're in, it's kind of the same process in respect of that. I work very much based on my instinct and my intuition as to how I think a particular business is where they're at and how I think they need to fix it. So there is some intelligence behind it, there is some skill and knowledge, but my starting point is intuitive based rather than anything else. And as I said a second ago, it's all about people anyway, and so you've got to figure out what it is that's going to make them do what they need to do to get them to where they need to be. So what I'll do, if I may, I did get to the extensive preparation of preparing 5 headings, but I wanted today to be really about answering any questions that you may have. No particular order, but I'm going to start with leadership. I go to an awful lot of companies that seem to have lost their way in terms of how they need to push their business forward. And if you're running a business, or even if you're heading a department on the South Coast and they each run their particular division, 2 are the senior partners of the firm, and they kind of very intelligent people, know exactly what they're doing, been at it 25 years plus, but sometimes you kind of lose your way, I guess. And I talk to them a lot about leadership, but I want to just say to you that there's an awful lot of guff talked about leadership. So I'm going to just encapsulate it in one simple sentence, if I may. Of course, there's a lot more to it than that. It's a bit like, but let me just, I think that leadership is really just telling people this is how we do things around here. That's it. You see, I think people want to be directed as to what's expected from them. And I go to a lot of companies where they've forgotten to do that. And what happens is over time, I can name several companies I'm working with at the moment, what happens is over time, the people working in the firm just come in, do their job and leave at the end of the day. And if they've done it well, that's a bonus. And if they've just done it well, that's seen as great. If they've done a lousy job, then the owner has to try and pick up the problem. Let me give you one example. I'm dealing with a company on the South Coast. They turn over just a couple of £1 million, potential of doing a hell of a lot more. They're a double glazing company. They actually make windows for commercial buildings such as this country. Very successful over the years. The 2 owners are a little bit loggerheads with each other in terms of one is frustrated, the other one is trying to deal with all the problems, and that causes a bit of a clash, and that's something I'm dealing with on a separate basis. But everybody else working in the firm is kind of just doing their job. Does that make sense, everybody? They're just coming in and kind of doing their job. And I got them all together and said, look, here's a list of problems we're trying to deal with. This is how you can help. This is what we expect you to do now. And I kind of almost pulled them back into line in terms of just setting out the expectations for them. And I said, look, from now on, this is how we're going to do things around here. And it's interesting how within a couple of weeks things have changed dramatically. They take their own initiative to come in and actually sort out the shop floor, which was a mess. Couldn't see what was going on. They took that own initiative. They now come in and sort of at the end of the day they do little things like cleaning up, leaving the factory in a state where when they come in the following morning, they're straight onto the tools and getting whatever they need to get on with. And it just seemed to me that they'd lost their way in terms of telling people what they expected from them. So in my opinion, leadership, in my opinion, is just saying to people, this is how we get things done around here, and this is what I expect from you. Now, there's an awful lot of companies out there that talk about empowering people, and that's very important. But the companies that talk about it, I find are the ones that can afford it. You know, with the best will in the world, employees, staff, it is a little bit like having children. You've kind of got to tell them what they need to do, when they need to do it, and how they need to do it, with a bit of scope in there to allow them to think for themselves and sort out any problems that they have. So I'm not talking about micromanagement, but I am talking about the fact that you kind of just got to direct them, hence the word director or managing director. You've got to direct people. And you know, it's very well for, I have a friend of mine who worked for IBM, and he decided 1 year to take a 1 year sabbatical, which is great, because they still paid him. And that's fantastic, because at the bottom line of IBM's numbers, the fact that a couple hundred people that year had a sabbatical didn't really dent the bottom line very much. So they can afford to kind of do that kind of stuff. The businesses I deal with can't. And so a lot of the time I'm going in and looking at what they're doing and hang on a second, that we need to put back things into line a little bit more, and maybe we need to start by explaining to people what we expect from them, and also get them involved with what we're trying to achieve as a business. Anybody got any questions they want to throw at me? I'll make it very basic. You're looking, Nick, very pensive. Okay. All right. Okay. That's fine.
Can I ask you,
yeah.
Is there not an issue in that if you're a business owner, then you're going to put your back into work,
yep.
And you're not going to be limited by 9 to 5 or whatever. But if you're an employee, then you're really there just to fill in the hours during the day to some extent.
And so what you have to do there, oh sorry, I'll let you finish your question, my apologies.
Yeah, okay, that's the question.
Okay, so what you have to do, I think, as a business owner and as a leader of a business, is you have to, and I'll come up to in a minute, you have to motivate people. So I'll come back to that now. In fact, I'll use it as my second topic in a minute, so that hopefully will answer the point that you're trying to make. Sales. Most companies aren't very good at it. Why they're not very good at it? Well, a lot of small businesses got into doing what they're doing because they love what they're doing, and after a few years of exhausting all their contacts and maybe getting hold of some previous customers they dealt with at a previous firm, now what? And at some point in my experience, I've never had over the past 14 years one client who hasn't at some point said, so how do we get more customers in the door? So what I try and do is I try and talk to them about whatever the processes that work for them in terms of potential new customers. Where do we find them from? What's our process from when we first talk to them to when we actually make a sale and get the money from them and sign a contract? The fundamental problem with sales is this, and the late great Sir John Harvey Jones said it 20 odd years ago. He said the problem with British industry is that we underestimate the value of professional sales. And I think that's true. Nowadays, everybody's under pressure. Even if you are a senior partner running a division of a law firm, you're under pressure. You're under pressure to find potential new clients, but you're also under pressure maybe to look at what more business you can get from that set of customers you've been dealing with over the past 3 years, and that's always a starting point. The point of sales is this, that I put this up, is because it almost happens to be, in most cases, haphazard. It happens to be by default rather than by design. And I talked to a lot of companies about the fact that they actually need to create business by design, not by default. So what's your process? What are you trying to do? How are you trying to explain to people what it is that you can fix for them? Because what fundamentally is sales? Sales is, in my opinion, is here's the problem, here's the solution. And what you're trying to do is exchange your product or service for their money. But that very simple transaction is incredibly complex. Because yes, there's a process to it. Yes, there's a huge amount of skill to it. And sales isn't just having the gift of the gab, whatever that is. And in 25 years, I've never figured out what the gab is and where it's from. So if somebody can answer that for me, that'd be great. So, if in your business, at some point, you've struggled with developing new customers, what I'll say to you is that I see a lot of this when I go to companies, they don't actually have a very little understanding about sales. It's all done by default rather than by design. And so as I said earlier on, I specialise very much in helping them trying to figure this part of their business out. Does anybody have a question about that they want to throw at me?
It's interesting because I've worked with companies where the salespeople don't want to be called salespeople. They describe the sales process as an ugly process, and they don't want to be. So it's almost like it's almost like you have to change the words to suit them, which is wrong. But there's an uncomfortable feeling for a lot of people about being a salesman, especially in a small business.
Well, I think that if your job role is sales, then get used to it. Or get out and do something else. I'm with you.
No, absolutely. But it's hysterical. I've been on a few occasions.
Andrew, do you know the fundamental problem I found? My background is sales. I work for companies. The fundamental problem with sales is this: there aren't many salespeople. There's an awful lot of reps. I remember once a few years ago, I was filling up in a garage, and this was before I was married. Scared my wife watches this video. And I was just filling up, and there was a nice girl called up with a car, and of course I was in my 20s, so I said, "Hello, like you doing?" She said, "Oh, what are you, a rep?" I said, "No, I'm a salesperson." She said, "What's the difference?" And I looked at her and I thought, I can't actually bother to explain it. Reps represent and salespeople sell. But let me just come back a step. As a business owner, of course, if you start on your own, you've actually got to master that skill as much as you possibly can. And when I talk to business owners, it's not that I'm trying to turn them into salespeople, but I just want them to have an appreciation, and I just give them a small amount of the skills required to get them enough of the way through so they get to the point where they can hire a salesperson. I've stopped a lot of companies hiring salespeople in two scenarios particularly. One, they've got salespeople like performance, let's hire somebody else. No, get the ones you've got performing first, then hire somebody else, or get rid of the ones you've got, then hire somebody else. Don't just compound the problem by finding somebody else who then can't perform as well. Now you've got 3 and 5 that can't perform. No, fix the problem first. The second thing I've done is especially very small businesses with 2 or 3 people in it, I've picked one of the 3 that I felt probably has a more of a bent towards sales and finding customers and developing customers, and help them as much as I can in terms of just giving them some skills to do that, whether they've liked it or not. Because I've said to them, if you learn how to do a bit of this yourself, then when you hire somebody whose job it is to sell, you'll know what to expect because you've done it yourself. And in running a business, I'm afraid you've got to do things that maybe you didn't sign up for when you first started your business. That's just the way it is. But when I meet companies, I've got a few at the moment. In fact, I've got one particular organisation at the moment who's in the, let me call it the property business. And their language does not lend itself to anything to do with sales, apart from when they've actually made that transaction, then they call it a sale. Up until that point, that word doesn't come into their vocabulary. I'm changing that. And as I've changed that, they've started to realise that they're actually in the business of selling, not in the business of moving whatever trying to move. And interestingly, they're in an industry where they have a sales opportunity at 2 different occasions, and they didn't understand that. And now I've changed it. I've introduced the word, and it's okay if I scare one of the two of them off, because I only want 2 or 3 really good people, and then we'll build on that. Again, it's quality, not quantity. And if 1 or 2 kind of, you see, sometimes what happens is when I go into companies and you start to maybe change things, and the skill in changing things, in my opinion, is trying to work out what it is that an organisation can deal with at any one time. So you don't just blast in there and go, right, let's change everything and we'll do it all overnight. No, you've got to figure out what they can take at any one time. And I do that purely based on my intuition. I'm changing their attitude towards things, and funny enough, they had a bit of a light bulb moment when I said, no, why don't we call it this, and let me explain why, and they started to change the way they act. What's that going to do for them as a business? They'll get better results.
And well, the point about motivating people, I have a strong belief
Yeah.
that, so in the context of sales, is that every member of the organisation is part of the sales force, or a representative.
I will even include the receptionist in that. Yeah.
This talks to some of the companies I've spoken to where they go, oh, dirty word. You actually, if you're the receptionist, you may be picking up something very difficult and something else you do with some identity, there's things that are going on, you may meet people around. Just engage them.
Absolutely.
And bring them into the organisation to even sell themselves.
But it's even silly things that I've been. I mean, the skill I help think helping companies is picking up on the very subtle things that they don't realise actually have a massive effect on their business. But it's little things like I remember being at one company last month where I was just in reception and the receptionist was chatting to somebody. The phone was ringing and it just rang forever and a day. And I afterwards said, let me just explain something. What do you think was happening when the phone was ringing? And it is the little things that make a difference. If the phone was ringing, did you know who was ringing? No. What do you think that person was thinking? I don't know. Let me tell you. When the phone was ringing, everybody knew what was going on except the person ringing. So the rule is you pick up on the 3rd ring, and there's psychology behind that. And so yes, very subtly you can introduce the fact, in order not to scare people, with the fact that, okay, let's not call it sales, let's call it in your context, receptionist, let's call it customer awareness, change it to just for their benefit. But of the hardcore salespeople and management, I call it sales because that's what it is. And you know, sales is like a lot of any business, and you know that's why you have to understand the intelligence behind it, the process, and you've got to be highly skilled, in my opinion.
Yeah,
sorry.
I have a sort of theory about that. You can always tell what a company feels about is how far the visitor's car park is away from the main gate. If you have to walk through the rain to get to their building, then you don't think so much. You think, well, I'm not going back there again.
That's a very good point. There's a lot of psychology that goes on, isn't there? Look, I know some of these points. I'm just bringing up headings that I said in my introduction on the web that I just wanted to tell you that I've experienced. So there's lots more than this, but let me just come to this important point, which I hope answers your question. I didn't catch your name.
Yeah.
You're motivating people. Okay. How do you motivate people?
Money.
That's a very good point. That's
Number one.
Remember that. One, money. How interesting. Okay. How else do you motivate people?
Recognition and rewards in non-monetary form.
R without money. Yeah. Okay. So it's my life, it's my benefit. Sorry. 3. Anybody else winning another one? How do you motivate people?
Thank them, appreciation.
Recognition, reward. Okay. All right. Anything else?
Tell them what's happening.
Tell them what's happening. Keep them informed. Okay. Anything else?
Stretch the good people.
Stretch the good people. Yeah.
Let them control their own life.
Control. Okay. Let me tell you what I think. Sorry.
To trust.
Trust. 3. very good one, yeah. I guess that runs with a bit of control, trust. Okay. Let me tell you what I think. Number one, money is not a motivator. Never has been, never will be. Shall I tell you why? Money goes in the bank, goes back out. Not very motivating. Funny enough, people aren't motivated by money when it comes down to it. They like having it. What they like is what money can do. They like the fact that with money they can buy that bigger house, that car, that suit, whatever it is they want. But money on its own is not a motivator. It's what it can do. So I know there's a subtlety there, but it's what it can do that's the difference. How you motivate people in one sentence, I'll do what I did in leadership, one sentence. You find out what it is that turns them on, and then show them how easy it is to get it. That's it. And you can read all the motivating books you like in the world. That is how you motivate people. You know what? The problem I found in business is that we actually get too sophisticated for our own good. We're just not that clever. I'm afraid to say, we're not. We're too sophisticated for our own good.
Yeah.
Find out what it is that turns somebody on and then show them how to get it. That's how you motivate somebody.
That's very true, actually. No.
Just my view. I mean, you can completely disagree with me. You know. Target. Okay. Let me give you a theory of mine. Over the past 3 years, when we dipped. Sorry, you put your hand up. My apologies.
No.
Okay. This is something I'm talking to a lot of my customers about at the moment, and I've talked publicly about this before. We're very good at talking about targets. We're absolutely lousy at setting them. And everybody buys into the idea they've got to have a target, and yeah, you've got to be. But we're very poor at actually doing anything about it. We love talking about it. It's a bit like you love the idea but not the reality of it. And I find this a lot. People talk about it, they've got their business plan, they've got their target for the year, but it's just only a business plan which sits in the drawer somewhere. Again, we're too sophisticated for our own good. In recent months, I've been talking to customers about setting one very simple target. It's a financial one, but one very simple target. And I'll explain the science behind it in a minute. But let me give you some of my theory. When we first got into this recession, and by the way, I think recession's really good. It's bad, but it's also good. And it's good for a number of reasons, but here's why I like it. Recession says you've run out of time. You've run out of time. You have no more time to dilly-dally or mess about or theorise or strategise or any of that. You've run out of time. You either do or die. And I had a theory a couple of years back when we first got into this recession, which was middle of '97. I had a theory that by the time we got to 2012, sort of spring 2012, we were going to start to climb out of it for no other reason than I thought, it's going to go like this, and we're going to scrape along the bottom around about 2011. Beginning of 2012, we'll start to very, very slowly climb out of it. I don't think we'll recognise it, but I think we will. And I based it on the fact that we were going to have the Olympics, based on the fact that the last thing they wanted was the eyes of the world on a bloody miserable nation. So my theory was that's when we're going to start to climb out of it. I know it's not very scientific. I read or heard a management consulting company talk about the fact that they think that's going to happen based on numbers and projections and who knows whatever. I think we are going to see an upturn come this time next year. I think it's going to be very gradual, but the most important thing about an upturn is you've got to be ready for it. Because it will last for the next 7, 8, 9 years, and you've got to be ready for it. So I've been talking to customers about having 2011, the second part of 2011, because we're halfway through, setting one hard-nosed financial target that says, this is where I want to be by the end of 2011. So the first half of 2011 is done. Look at the beginning of the year and say, say to yourself, what did I set as a target for my business in terms of billings, in terms of turnover? What was that target I had? Look at where you are now, reassess it. If you're halfway through, great, add a little bit more, and then that's your target for the next 6 months. If you're way off beat, reassess it and set yourself a sensible target that just stretches you a little bit. And then act like a man, woman possessed. Focus on one single monetary target. Because what that will do is it will eliminate all the things that are putting you off track. All of a sudden, decisions on issues that come up will be made in a split second because you haven't got time to mess about. You have no more time. All the systems you wanted to get in place, the people you wanted to sort out, the ones you wanted to hire, fire, move offices, change offices, all the stuff you wanted to do gets done. Why? Because you have no more time, because you're focused on one solitary, hard-nosed target, and you're going to do it come heaven or hell. It cuts through. It cuts through the grime and the mess and straight to the point. And if at the end of the year you reach that target, it means you've got in place what you need in place for your business to take advantage of the upturn. Because this year has to be about getting your business in shape, ready for the upturn. And the only way I think you can do that is by giving yourself, your business, a one hard-nosed financial target, because then everything else goes by the wayside. Because you're going to need the money next year to invest, develop your website, whatever it is you need to do. But it's incredible when you have one particular objective, how you just, it's a knife button.
I agree with you as regards being focused and being single-minded. I agree with you as regards being focused and being single-minded, and there's nothing better than a commercial target to make that happen. Where I struggle is I come from what's called a quantitative background, and the essence of that is you cannot manage what you cannot measure. And the idea being there is that, great, you may be doing very well, but you may be misleading yourself. The market is giving you that extra bit. Yeah. But you may not actually be progressing yourselves in a way to be prepared for next year. There may be a wave that you're on, and you may be lucky. So I buy absolutely the whole the concept of being focused. I think that's absolutely right.
Well, let me put
you've got to have some metrics.
Yes. Well, let me put some intelligence behind it then, because. With a number of our clients, it hasn't been a financial target for them, it's been a different target for them to do with volume of clients and what have you, that achieve a very much a similar type of objective. So, yes, well, in the context of this brief conversation, that's my comment. In the context of working with the client, there's a bit of intelligence behind it. But the point is still the same. We come out with one thing that we're going for. And yes, it has to be measurable. And yes, it hasn't got to be the detriment of the business. There is some intelligence behind it, so my apologies for not making that clearer. But having said all of that, we sometimes get lost in all that kind of stuff and miss the point. I want people to be finishing the year on a high in order that they can take advantage of an upturn. And part of that, a big chunk of that, is having financial focus.
And taking that and building it on it, the whole motivating. So if people are planning into a better year, and they see that they can deliver their targets when stretched this year, actually the motivation that comes off the back of this is a can-do attitude that can be built. So my point about the markets, if you're saying actually we've done this bloody well in this market, we've reached our targets, the year better next year, the momentum and motivation you get in driving people, it's not a 1 + 1 = 2 exercise.
No, not at all. No, it's much more. That's why I'm driving, not all, most of them towards this kind of mentality that says, this is what we're going for this year, so that we finish on, because this is what it's going to give us the next year.
Can I ask you a different question? Who should own that target?
That's an excellent question. First of all, it starts with the man at the top, the person at the top. I don't think you need to. Well, I filtered it down to people. I filtered it down to the salespeople as well. That says, and I said to them one-on-one, this is what you need to do. Forget everything else. Not what your colleagues are doing. This is what you need to do. So I start with the people that are responsible for bringing those figures in. But I bring it down to whatever level I down to. So yes, it starts at the top. Always starts at the top, in my opinion. And then you've got to intelligently figure out where below that person then you need to go.
One of the big problems I find.
Can I say very quickly though, can I say that with some of the smaller companies I'm dealing with, I get them all involved. I get them all involved. We at least have a quarterly meeting that says this is where we are this quarter. Just so you know where we're all at. Not because, but funny enough, what happens there is, excuse me, they start to make stuff a little bit quicker, that bit more accurate, the mistakes go down, there's a bit more diligence involved, there's a bit more care. All of a sudden, everybody's doing that job just there. If everybody just does it 5% better, it's a massive, you're right, the collector isn't 1 plus 1, the end result is by doing that. Sorry.
Yeah, one of the things I find, especially with small companies, is they don't know their customers. And they don't, when they go to see the customer, they don't bother to find out what exactly the guy wants.
No, they don't go through that because, what is something? You're trying to find out what the problem is and how you're going to fix it. It's incredibly complex, that. I know I say it in a very quick sentence, but that in itself is incredibly complex, and that's why I say there are very, very few salespeople who actually understand that process intimately. But you make a very good point. I had a client of mine, haulage company, very nice family firm, we go an awful long time. Sorry?
No,
not that big, no. Lovely company, nice for doing with family 130 years. And I said to them, how many customers have you got? And they said, we've got about always is an indicator. We've got about 600-700. I said, fantastic. When was the last time you had to see any of them? We've never been to see them. Oh, okay. Well, I'll tell you what, let's go through an exercise, and I've got it down to, their top 30 customers. And then I said, out of that, what would have top 50? And I said, well, out of that, why don't we pick a dozen or so that we'll actually go and see, we'll just see what happens. Let me just take it out, and we'll just, for the hell of it, the two of us will go together, and we'll see what happens. And of course, what happens is, we walk into the first one, they've been dealing with them 9 years, and they said, well, we didn't know you did that. Yeah? And what did they get? They got some storage business from them, they got another route that they didn't know about, and of course, what does that do? The more products and service you can sell a client, the more attached they are to you, and of course, they're less likely to go somewhere else, because it becomes difficult. They can't unravel it. Went to the second client, oh, I didn't know you did that. Right, okay. Yeah, we did. 4 meetings, 3 clients said, didn't know you did that, we came out with some business, and of course, their initial worry of, gosh, it's getting tough here. I said, well, you know what, you've got a big enough customer base, why don't you just go through that exercise? You've got a big enough customer base, why don't you just go through that exercise? And I didn't get clever with Derek about it, I just said to him, look, we just need to ask some basic questions. This is what we're going to ask people, because this is what's relative to our industry, and you're going to have to think on your feet in terms of how you respond to that. Practice makes perfect, that's what you need to go and do. Do we need to get more intelligent than that? Yes, we do. But they're just going through that process at the moment. Ironically, of course, as I predicted with them, I said, you know what, you're going to go through this exercise, and you're going to spend 2 or 3 days a month out of your timetable, and we worked out how you could do that, because that was not a problem. I looked at what they're doing in terms of their own time management, and I said, well, what's going to happen, Derek, is this. Whilst you're doing all this work over here, you're going to get a whole load of work from over here. I can't explain how, but my world view is that when you move, Providence moves with you. And all of things, some things start to happen, don't they? Even God can't steer a parked car. I know it's not Sunday, but even he's not that good either. So what happens is they started to do some activity they hadn't done before. It's very easy. All the clients, nobody closed the door to them, but they went to see them. And it's quite funny because he'd never worn a suit before, and they kind of all laughed, but they took him seriously. Somebody asked them serious questions, they answered them, and all of a sudden we were finding potential pieces of work they didn't know about. That's the way it goes. So, let me put one more thing up on there. There's an awful lot of stuff, especially broadcasters, that talk about mission statements. You've probably read an awful lot of those over the years. I think it's important for a business, big or small, to have a vision. What's should that vision look like? It's quite simple. What is it we want people to say about us in 5 years' time? What do you want people to say about Hart Brown in 5 years' time? No, I don't, you don't answer that question, by the way, Nigel, don't worry. The point I'm making is exactly that. What is it that you want somebody to say about the market, your customers, the wider commercial environment? What is it you want people to say about your business in 3 or 5 years' time?
I want them to tell the guy next door who might eventually be a customer for me, by introduction.
Whatever your vision is, here's the important thing. It has to be very clear, has to be very specific, and you have to keep it at the forefront of your mind. And if you're running your own small business, it's what you think about the first thing in the morning, the last thing at night. Are you about to say something? Oh, no. I know some of these topics seem incredibly simple and oversimplistic, but actually they're the difference that makes
position in the market means you're really good at A, and does that mean you can do B, leveraging those same strengths? A lot of people go into B because they think their customers expect it of them, or because they see competitors C down the road doing it, irrespective of whether it actually works for them.
Absolutely right.
There's a very interesting website that's about British companies that have disappeared. And there's hundreds of them. And when you read down, they all started off with one product that was we're talking about large companies. And they made this one product that beat the world. So what happened next was a foreign company would come along, you push retire. So
No, that's fine. No, please.
Never look at your watch when. And basically these companies stuck to their one product. They got taken over by French and German and whatever companies who stole or took the rights to those products and took them back to France, shut the factory down here, and that's another factory gone. And that's happened throughout our history, our industrial history. I mean, it's amazing.
I worked in the tobacco industry actually in the 70s, and I was with Carreras Rothmans, and I worked for a leaf dealer as well. And one of the issues there was they wanted to diversify because they could see the future. There would be a declining demand for tobacco. It didn't happen for 40 years, but they wanted to diversify into other areas. And I think one of the problems was that they didn't realise what sort of businesses they were going into. It doesn't matter how much they researched it. It might have been the way it was financed or the way that you manufactured. There was something quite different about it that meant you didn't have an economy of scale or whatever it was you were looking for. And there was nothing in those days that produced as much money as introducing a successful cigarette brand, say. So basically they went back to their roots and they made a lot more money.
Sometimes I said it wrong. We're too clever for our own good because we're not that clever. So I think it's a little. Just because you might feel there's a correlation doesn't mean there is.
There's a book called $1 Billion Mistakes, Gregory. It's about big companies, and it tells you everything not to do in the first place. But one of the reasons you wouldn't do it is because of necessarily the market. You should really let shareholders diversify.
Don't you think there are also trends that people follow? Like, for example, in the 70s, everyone used to have, the larger companies all had diversified portfolio because that spread risk. And then during the 80s, it changed again, and now it's concentrated on your core business. So that goes on. There are a lot of sort of themes that people sort of follow in the way
Do you know what it tells me, Nigel? It tells me that some of these people that run these large corporations actually don't know any more than you and I.
No.
That's very true.
Don't know any more than you and I. So, and actually I think it's much more difficult to run a small business than it is a big business. Because with a small business, number one, you've got to be on top of everything. Secondly, you've got to be right on the ball with everything, dark, whatever it is. And another thing, of course, about running a small business is that you are fundamentally always responsible for everything that's going on. And I think there's much more to do with any small change you make has an effect on the whole business. Whereas in a big business, you make a change. I've worked with a number of big clients, and you end up working with a division of theirs, which doesn't actually affect the whole company. So
I used to run a very large company, and we used to create incubators.
Yeah.
And the idea of incubators is you find them a discrete place that you could put a number of select people, there were high performing people in the rest of the business.
There you go.
It was very clear they had a budget, but they didn't have any more management time than their revenue reflected. And they had to prove it.
Yep.
And if they broke through the thresholds, they'd get more time at the board, they'd get more time for resources, they'd do it. But it was the only way you could control it without distracting the rest of the organisation.
Well, there we are. Just said it didn't take you off core.
Yep.
It didn't burn you any more money than you were prepared for it to burn.
Yep.
And if something came with great, it didn't, then you swallowed that budget anyway. That was part of your overall strategy.
Building a portfolio of tools that could help the business.
Look, I said earlier on, I just wanted to just highlight some of the things that I've come across. I've worked with a whole variety of different people and different businesses. I'll just end because, and my apologies for looking at my watch, but I just realised that I think there might be as this. I'll just end with this. I believe that if you're running a small business, it's incredibly difficult but important that you have some sort of balance. And I heard a new management consultant at an event I was at recently stand up and say that over the years he'd come across an awful lot of businesses which they'd helped to develop and to become successful. But as a result of some of that success, the casualty was invariably sometimes the managing director, in terms of he'd built a fantastic business, everybody was happy, they've got the cars, they've got the holidays, but on the way, he'd lost, his wife hated him, his kids didn't want to talk to him, and his response to that was kind of the way things went. My response to that is, if that's where you've got to, you've made a massive, massive mistake. And it blows my mind how management consultants for a large company can stand up and say, oh, well, that's the way it goes. Let me just say that last recession, everybody was a life coach. Everybody's a business coach. One, pick somebody who doesn't have that sort of philosophy. Two, pick somebody who knows what they're talking about, and you can make a judgment on that. Three, pick somebody who knows something about, or quite a lot about sales. Most business coaches I come across know absolutely sod all about selling. And so I never understand why somebody takes them on board, because in my experience over the past 14 years, I've always been asked at some point, so how are we going to get more business in the door? So it's very important to have a very sound philosophy and to take it with you. That's me for now. Thank you very much. If you'd like to have a one-to-one, I'd be delighted to. Thank you for the management consultants in the room. Very kind of you to sat there quietly. I hope I haven't said anything too controversial.
Pick some ideas.
Well, that's fine. That's okay. That's all right. All accreditations to me. Thanks very much. But you see, I'm just like you. I come across lots of them now, and they bought a franchise, and I think, and you're taking really good money off somebody. And as I say, I'm not talking negatively about anybody, but I just think that there's an awful lot of companies out there that want really, really good advice and want to be told what to do next and how to do it, rather than it being brought out of them. And I've never been to business in 14 years I've been in business. But I think integrity and honesty are two key things to any business. And if you're looking to hire somebody, make sure that you work with somebody that does that.
Yeah, one thing I've learned is never go to the back. Or do the opposite, whatever.
For anything.
And I was 26 years a bank manager, so.
Well, there you go. We should have you doing a talk. Thank you. Thank you very much. It's a shame that we didn't.